Hello, good day, everybody. Glad to see a couple of you already here. As always, we're going to wait for a couple of minutes just to let some more people join as we are expecting some more to come. So we'll start in around 5 minutes. All right, so we've waited for a couple of minutes for some more people to join us, which has now happened. So it seems like a good time to start. First of all, welcome everyone. Good morning, good day, and good afternoon, depending on where around the world you are watching from. Very happy to have you here. Um, so I'll start with a short introduction of myself, because why not? And then I'll introduce, of course, our webinar host, who is also here, but not in front of the camera. And then I'll talk a little bit about the two guests that we'll be having today. So my name is Daan Roosendaal. I'm a sales representative here at SIBE. A couple of you that have watched our previous webinars might know me because I've been doing these for a couple of months now, so you might recognize my face. As always, we have our trusted moderator here with us, Jesse van Dongen, and we have a special guest as well, whose photo is not on here, but we have Quinten, who is our new marketing professional here at SIBE, who's learning the tricks of our webinar system because he will be taking over from Jesse for the next webinar. All of this is irrelevant, but I just wanted to introduce him as well. Then for our guest, of course, we have Wafaey Swelim, CEO and founder of QOROX. And we have Nick Lane, director of Iconic Construction. And these guys will be introducing themselves a bit better later. We have some interviews prepared with them for you today. These have been pre-recorded as it is currently 2 a.m. in the morning in Australia or New Zealand, sorry, where these guys are coming from. So we didn't dare to ask them to stay awake from that for that. So we pre-recorded this. While we're playing these recordings, you can still ask questions in the chat because me, Jesse, and Quinten will all be here in the chat to answer your questions. You just can't ask the questions to Wafaey and Nick because they're not here. For those of you that don't know how these webinars work or are here for the first time, of course, welcome. We do these webinars once a month, and I believe this is episode 12, which means we are now celebrating our 1-year webinar anniversary, which is of course very nice. So these are live, as you can see, but after this, we will also upload the full recording of the webinar to our library and also our YouTube channel. So if you want to watch this one back because you missed something or you couldn't find the time to watch the whole thing, or you want to look at some of our other webinars that we've done before, you can always go check them out. Like I just said, if you have questions, please feel free to ask them in the chat. Our moderators and myself will be happy to answer them. We also have a Q&A at the end of this webinar, as we always do. I can imagine that you might have a lot of questions for Wafaey and Nick. Unfortunately, like I said, they're not here, so they can't answer it, but we will try our best to do so for them. The subject of this webinar, or the content of this webinar, will be looking at the projects that Wafaey, our partner in New Zealand, together with Nick, have done. So first they'll introduce themselves and talk a little bit about where they came from, what they did before working with our technology. Then we'll talk about the projects that they have done together and apart using our technology. We'll take a look at the projects that they have planned for the future, and then I will ask them what do they think that this technology will bring in the future overall, so not just for their projects but for the construction industry as a whole. So without further ado, I believe the next slide will be the first part of the interview. I am wrong. It's a poll. So a lot of you might have been researching us for a little bit, and if you have, then the name QOROX might sound familiar to you, maybe even iconic. So we were wondering if you ever heard of these guys before this webinar. And I believe you can answer this poll below your screen. I see that one person has already heard of them, 2 already, a lot of them already, 4 people have heard of it. Cool. And then if you can, or if you want to, you can leave in the chat, how did you hear of these guys? Was that via us as SIBE or completely separate of us? We would be interested to know. I see a couple have not seen these guys, so this would be then a great opportunity, of course, to get to know who they are, what they do, and all that. And then, of course, the option other named partners. That will be interesting for us to know as well. What other partners of us do you know? Um, cool. All right. Thank you guys for that. I believe this would be the time that we start the interview with them. So sit back and enjoy. And if you have questions, again, feel free to ask them in the chat. Thank you for being here, guys. If you could help me introduce you a bit better than I just did in the live version, then that would be great. Wafaey. If you could introduce yourself for me, tell me a little bit about yourself and about your background. Same goes for Nick, obviously, after that, but I would like to ask you to start, Wafaey.
So my name is Wafaey, Swelim. Originally from Egypt, and I studied architecture and engineering when I was in university in Egypt, and then I wanted to do construction management more than design. So I worked a couple of years in Egypt in construction management, and then moved to Dubai in 2006 during the reconstruction boom over there, and lived there for 7 years, working all sorts of projects from doing fit outs for yachts for the royal family to working the Formula One track in Abu Dhabi, building a five-star hotel for Ritz-Carlton, and distribution center for Caterpillar in Mali. And then moved to China and did the same thing over there, built the industrial buildings, and then moved to New Zealand in 2015. And say why it's a long way around to New Zealand is because my wife is from here, and yeah, your wife is because, as you know, happy wife, happy life.
All right. Thank you, Wafaey. Nick, for you, could you introduce yourself as well to us, please?
So my name is Nick Lane. I founded a construction company in New Zealand called Iconic Construction, and we've been operating since 2009. My background is basically I left school and I became an architect for the grand total of 2 weeks, and learned pretty quick that I was better with my hands building stuff than I probably was coming up with drawings. But now I quite enjoy the mix of getting stuck in with architects and designing properties and doing what we do. And yeah, more recently involved with Wafaey and QOROX in getting into the 3D printing world.
All right. And then that's a nice bridge, actually, because then we end up, of course, why did you guys end up in this 3D construction world, and how did that happen? Wafaey, if you can introduce that part a little bit for me.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I lived and worked in a lot of countries, and New Zealand was the fourth country that I worked in construction in, and I found that there's similar problems in every country. Dubai, there was a ridiculous amount of money, but we still have problems. In China, there was a lot of resources, and we still have problems. And in New Zealand, does not have money or resources. So you end up with a very challenging environment, and you need to be extremely efficient in what you're doing. And what we're doing was not efficient enough. So I reached 2018 a moment that said something has to change, or I need to leave the whole industry. And I came across a video of 3D printing studio apartment, and I started to research, and I ended up to work with Civi, because Civi had the full package. At that time, no company were able to give you enough support to develop material, or had the whole package as a turnkey solution. And for the printing part, obviously the compliance comes after that, but this was worked with Civi, and also it was quite easy when I traveled and met the guys in Oz, and saw the first facility that you're in and the first robot that was used, and give me confidence that this is where the technology or the construction industry needs to go. And feeds a little bit in this. The idea that I have is that the status quo cannot continue, because we're repeating the same solutions, the same problems, achieving the same results. and somehow we think that some way somebody will do something and everything will get fixed, which is close to the definition of madness, doing the same action expecting a different result.
Yeah, I believe that was Einstein who said that. So for you, it was indeed um, a means to an end to actually solve all of the problems that you came across, and you found then the 3D concrete printing solution that we offered, and you thought, well, this is a good way to solve the problems that I'm facing. Right? That's a good description of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then Nick, of course, Iconic has a mission as well, which is probably interesting. But for the sake of this webinar, I'm more interested in why and how you met Wafaey and how you guys decided to work together.
So our introduction was purely by chance. Through one of my other jobs, I was at an airfield one day and looked across the airfield, and sitting outside this house was a couple of funny looking seats, which had caught my eye. We were looking for some seats to put around our pool area at home, and so I still have the photo of the helicopter sitting at the airfield with these seats in the background before I even met Waf, and I've managed to capture this moment of my life where things probably took a bit of a change.
Yeah.
And went over there, and Waf sort of walked outside, and I got chatting to him, and turns out I'd met his father-in-law a few times, and so I think we spoke for about 2 hours while I was waiting for my clients to go and do what they had to do, and we discussed a job that my construction company Iconic was in the planning phase of, which was going to be using precast panels, and so we sort of had a chat about how we could change that into 3D printing. And we're also from the same town in New Zealand, so the next week we had a meeting about to go down and have a look and see what this product looks like, and from that point on we were all in, and so from that point on it's changed our thinking in terms of how to construct and produce what we need to on site.
Yeah, so pretty much a lucky meeting, but that's of course obviously how those things goes quite often. I think we already answered the next question that I had for you guys, like other construction projects before you actually took on this technology. Wafaey, you've told a bit about your history in different countries already. And Nick, you were in the planning phase of doing some construction with precast panels. Was that it, what you just said? Or did you do some other projects?
That was one particular job, but so my company deals in, we do quite a wide range of things. So we do from restaurant, retail fit outs through to multi-housing, multi-unit developments. And the last few years has been quite heavy in that sort of apartment, 2-story timber frame, brick veneer claddings with your plasterboard linings. So yeah, it's quite a range of stuff that we do. This particular project was one that we thought straight away that it could work on.
Yeah. So there's been quite a bit of a step probably to go from those construction techniques to this newer technique. I believe we'll be talking about that a little bit later as well. So, and then I had an overall question for the both of you, because I might know, but a lot of people might not know. What is your position in the 3D development of the development of 3D printing in New Zealand? Are there other players? How early were you guys, or especially Wafaey, of course, how early in this development were you actually printing already?
So we got our testing and certification done in 2019. We were the first one in Oceania, so Australia, New Zealand, and the South Pacific. And when we got the robot and we started printing in 2020, I believe we were still the first. We are the first one in New Zealand for sure, and we've been working with in compliance aspect of it, and also working with universities to try to develop more sustainable materials, and and trying to introduce the technology to the market through residential and commercial projects.
Great. So a lot of more development yet to come. We'll talk a little bit more about that later as well, but you guys were quite early then. All right, great. Cheers, guys. Yeah, so we're back live. That was the introduction and the background of our the two people that we invited, Wafaey and Nick. As you guys just heard, they've done some work together, but met by chance, which is, like I just said in the recording, how those things goes. Quick question, another poll, just to keep this thing a bit interactive. We were wondering if any of you guys or all of you are exploring the possibility of purchasing a 3D concrete printing printer and actually working with this technology. Now we might ask this question quite a lot, but it is of course the most interesting question for us to know the answer to. So, a couple of people are. At least more than half, so that's good news for us, right? I already have a 3D printer. Oh, I'm curious who that would be and what kind of printer that would be. If it's not ours, don't put it in the comments. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. That's absolutely fine, of course. Yeah, so we got quite a lot of people exploring the possibility of purchasing one. That's great to hear. If you have not already, please feel free to reach out via the contact form of our website. That will lead directly to me, as I am sales representative. So we can definitely get in touch and see how we can make that happen for you. If not, also feel free to reach out and I convince you that you actually should do that. All right. Thank you, guys. I believe after this poll, we directly go to the projects that Wafaey and QOROX have already done. I believe some of them are in collaboration with Nick. Some of them might not, but we'll hear all about those projects that they have already done. So, okay, thank you guys for the introduction. Now that we know a little bit more about you, I'm actually quite curious about the projects that you guys have already done, maybe together or maybe Wafaey by himself using our technology or using this technology. But we collected some projects that we know you did, and it would be great if you can talk us through them a little bit.
This was one of the early projects. They were indoor seating and table bases for a showroom in Oakland. And this project last year won the best in retail interior design.
That's cool.
New things, and part of it obviously was 3D printing. And it looks amazing. This showroom after it's completed.
Yeah. So did you guys paint these prints after, or was it with a pigment?
We had a mix. The seat that you see over there, it was actually printed with the charcoal oxide, so it was printed with black pigment in it, and the table bases were just painted. And then we played with different ways of doing it, and it works depending on the area that you're in. So the technology is very versatile. You can paint it, you can put pigments in it, or you can leave it as it is.
Yeah. All right. Really cool. And this, of course, exterior ones. We know that the outside benches. We've experimented with that as well. But this is interesting with a pattern as well.
Yeah. So the pattern here, this pattern is popular. It's more of like a weave pattern, or you can call it like a duvet, for some people, it's the seat that Nick saw was a smaller version of this one, and this I find that wanted something different in the backyard, and we delivered it. It's very simple to do.
Cool. Then, the columns and the potters or planters.
Yeah, so this one we tried to play a little bit with oxide. So you have the fade in the middle. So we started it with dark oxide, and then we put bags with no color in it, and then that's why it gets lighter in the middle, and then we start with bags with dark color in it at the end. So that's why it fades in and out. And this is 1.8 meters planter was printed in 12 minutes or something like that.
It's not bad at all.
Yeah, so this is a house in a place called Huya. It's west coast of Auckland. It's on the Tasman Sea. And this house, we believe it's the first solar passive house in the world to have 3D printed walls. These walls are being used as an energy sink. So during the day, the sun will heat the walls. The heat. This whole house has a very small fireplace, and it's the small opening that you see in the middle, curved sculpture. And this thing is going to heat a 190 square meter house. And that's
so it catches the sun on the walls, and then the walls retain that heat so efficiently that it then gets transferred as heating when the sun goes down, correct?
Exactly.
All right.
So this house had around 110 square meters of panels. We installed them on site over 3 times. So you can see in the bottom left there, this is the fireplace. The big opening is just shelving. So this print was a little bit of a challenge. It is 5.2 meters long overall, like the overall length of it, and it's 3.5 meters high. So we were pushing really the limits of the robot to get it. So we managed to do it and then transported it. Everyone was holding their breath when we were transporting it and lifting it, because we had never done anything that big before. And at the end of the day, it was a lot easier than what we thought it would be.
Do you remember what this part weighed?
Because it was hollow, I think it was just close to 2.2 ton or 2.3 ton.
Okay. It's not too bad, but no breaking during transport, luckily.
No, we didn't. We broke other panels, but not this one. This house right now is almost completed. It's in Marine in Auckland, and I believe it's one of the biggest standalone houses in the world using 3D. This house had a mix of walls between retaining walls, back the dirt in the bank, and external walls and internal walls. So we had walls that have insulation in them. We had walls that are just solid filled, and we printed this and we delivered. This has, I think, around 360 square meters of walls, and the house itself is 252 square meters. So I think in Imperial it's close to 3,000 feet.
3,000 square feet. Did you say that?
Yeah.
And in the beginning, you because we kind of lost your connection there for a second. Did you say this is the biggest footprint 3D printed building, according to you?
No, it's definitely the biggest one in the Southern Hemisphere. I don't know how it is, because there's some houses that are under construction in the States that are going to be similar size or even bigger. Know that this is the biggest one in the Southern Hemisphere. It's one of the biggest ones in the world. I'll claim it's the biggest because I don't think that could be it.
Pretty cool. And then this one, this one. Yes,
this
and
one
I was sorry. Yes, and I were discussing beforehand, and I was like, a rain garden. Yes, what's a rain garden? He's like, I don't know. And I was, are they gonna do something else with this? And yes, like, no, I think this is it. So please help us understand, what does this do, and where is it next?
So you can see there in the picture on the bottom left, there's a lot of so in New Zealand, the stormwater system in some areas is a little bit limited, steep. So if you are doing a new residential development, you need to find a way to store the stormwater. So this is effectively like a stormwater pond or collection that takes the water from all of the development and soaks it in it. And then after that, the overflow goes to this wetlands that's next to it. So the whole idea is that to reduce the amount of water that's coming from the development into the wetlands by storing it in there, and they grow and they put soil and plants in it, and the plants use the water to grow, and the amount of water that goes as an overflow is very minimal. So this is an S-shaped unit. It was designed by the architects. It actually was a lot more. The design of it was a lot more complicated. It wasn't a problem for us, but the guys that are doing the slab wanted to make it more simple for them because they use formwork. So we ended up simplifying it. And initially, it looked like an eel or sea snake, let's say. So it had a head, and now it doesn't have a head anymore. Now it looks both ends are similar.
So the design freedom was kind of not limited because of you guys, but because the guys actually had to use the formwork to make the foundation.
Yeah, and this happens a lot when you can push the limits of what could be done, and then you hit some traditional construction methods that are not flexible, and you end up stuck a little bit, not using the full potential of the technology, but you have to use. But at the same time, this was done a lot faster. This was 56 panels. Each one of them was different, and obviously we did not need to use formwork for them. All of the panels were placed in 2 days.
How many panels you say there were? 56?
56 panels.
Hats off to you.
We started to deliver these to for these are 3D printed islands that you put to protect pedestrians from traffic. I don't know if anyone have done this yet in the world. I think we might be one of the first ones.
I haven't seen it yet. So
yeah, so the guidelines says you need to have it painted white, and you have used red oxide concrete on it. And we delivered to go just before Easter, and it's very, very quick. Sample is slightly smaller. The rest are around 12 minutes print. This year was under 2 minutes.
Yeah. Was that a sped up video?
Yeah, it was time lapse.
I was just about to say, because that was really, really fast. I know this stuff is fast, but this was really fast. All right.
Yeah.
Great. And then I see in the picture on the right, you guys smoothed that while it was still wet, or was this after it dried up, you made it smooth?
We have a little secret way of doing this to make it smooth from the get-go. So it's not post-printing. It is during the printing.
Okay. And I reckon you're not going to be sharing that secret with us right now, right? Which is absolutely fine if you don't want to, of course.
Well, if it's how can I say, if it's not a public info service, it would have been a lot easier.
Piles Eco Pillars. That's an interesting looking print. I don't see those seashells coming out of our printer very often, so it would be great if you could tell us a little bit about that.
With Oakland Transport, they also manage all of the wharfs and all of the small launching. One of the things that they want to do is that to encourage marine life to regrow, especially after doing any expansion. So they are trying with incorporating mussel shells during the print to encourage marine life to hang on it. And also the other side doesn't have it. So some of the colors will have shells on them, some of them will not, to see if it actually makes any difference for the marine life to grow. Is it faster one or the other? So we have done this trial, and they were print the beginning of the year and sold just before Easter. And the idea is to see how it's going to progress, because they're planning to roll it across all of the Auckland region, and ultimately other councils will do the same thing because they have the same problems everywhere. You can see this is very close also to the Harbour Bridge in Auckland. So it's
so that should be interesting to see, because we've done some artificial reef printing before this, and for some reason marine life and coral just loves to grow on our material. But I'm very excited to see what kind of difference these see. So that was a bit of an overview of a couple of the projects that Wafaey and QOROX have done in the past. I know we talked about this in the chat. We are aware that Wafaey might be a bit hard to understand. His connection we did lose audio a couple of times. We tried to turn up its volume. It is what it is. That being said, as you saw, Wafaey and QOROX have done a lot of projects in different industries as well, with different use cases. So we were wondering, which industry do you see the most potential for 3D concrete printing? Of course, construction, but as you can see, there's a lot of other applications. So we're curious. What do you guys think? Affordable housing makes sense. We agree. Landscaping, yep. That's also traffic infrastructure makes sense. You just saw that. High-end housing, yeah, we have been in touch with a couple of clients that are interested in doing luxury villas and making it like a centerpiece of their building, that it is 3D printed for the how would you call that? For the that it's extra special, right? Because not a lot of people have it. So if you want something new and high end or high tech, then that also can become high end. Makes sense. Well, a lot of people agree with affordable housing. We do too, which is why we as SIBA focus on that quite a lot. And a lot of residential buildings, of course. That being said, Wafaey, together with Nick, have done a commercial building as well, in this case a daycare. And we will now listen a little bit to them talking about this last project that they did together, which is the iconic daycare project. You're working on this project right now, or is it finished at this point?
All done. So we finished it in the last week of March. So soon to have lots of little kids running around in there.
So you finished it in the last week of March. How coincidental that we're then doing this webinar right now, right? What a coincidence. Yeah. So I've seen some pictures of it, and of course during this interview we'll show a lot more pictures as well. But to start off, I was very interested in who did you do this project for, and with who did you do this project? Was it just you and Wafaey, and for what company did you do it?
So the daycare itself was a development for Iconic as its first sort of crack into commercial development, and we purchased some land that had an existing building and a very rundown old building with a daycare already operating out of it. So we worked with them to basically bring them a new building and build that for them, and then sign them up to be operating as the tenant in that building.
All right, great. Did you decide to do that using the 3D printing technology before you bought that land, or was that always the plan, or did you end up choosing to work with Wafaey after actually purchasing the land?
Yeah, so the purchase of the land took a little while. It took so there was a bit of subdivision work to chop it up a little bit, and so while all that was in council planning, we were working on the design for the building, and it was during that design phase that I had this chance meeting with Wafaey, and that's where we changed this job. So this was the job that we've changed from timber textured precast panels into 3D printing.
That's really cool. Still happy with that choice?
Yeah, very happy.
All right.
100%.
All right. Great. And then, of course, everyone that is looking forward to maybe start working with 3D printing in the future is, of course, very interested in what did that building process look like from start to finish. I reckon you start with digging and laying a foundation as always, but going from there, how did that process look?
Yeah, it says there was definitely a lot of learnings from previous jobs that QOROX were involved with, which helped streamline this job significantly. So learnings from two of the other ones where we really made sure things like the rebar was really straight and very accurate, and sort of like taking your normal tolerance amount and almost halving it, even though it would have been fine, but it just with the accuracy we gave it, it made the install quite a lot better. And the foundation, because originally it was designed for a precast panel, it took quite a lot of work to get the engineers to change their thinking into now something that's different. And so I would suggest that the foundation that these walls sits on is well over engineered for what it needed to be for these walls. Had we designed it from the start as being these walls, the foundations probably would have been a little bit easier to construct and a little bit less steel and a little bit less size to what's underneath it all. So the next part was just the speed of it. I think by the time we installed a panel, we were, you can see in one of the pictures there, the HIAB that's lifting the panels off. We had an average of about 22 minutes install for each panel, with the fastest one being 17 minutes. That's from hooking it up off the truck to hooking the next one off the truck to place it next to the one that we've just placed. So yeah, really fast. And the other beauty of it is because we're essentially working on a finished slab, you're not working in it amongst rebar with these big heavy panels, like a precast panel, for example. You're not on a hole, you're on a nice clean surface. It was and very light to deal with in terms of, just everything was lifted with a HIAB, so no cranes. Yeah.
That's really good. And you said that because this might be a question for Wafaey, or you might know this off the top of your head, the average printing time of those panels, how many of those panels did you print a day, or how long did it take you to print them all?
So the printing we was 42 square meters in a day. It's only utilizing the printing for only 5 hours.
Did you say 42 square meters a day using only 5 hours of printing?
Yeah, so with 5 hours of printing, we were able to do 42 square meters. And the whole thing was very quick to print because we did a system of continuous printing. So we would not stop between walls. So we actually print one wall and then another wall and then another wall. So we were able to print 3 walls back to back without stopping. And after that, the guys will have a break, we'll clean the system, and then we'll start again, and we can print 3 more. And then the rest of the day was preparing for the prints and curing the prints. So that's why we think that if we have a 10-hour print, we can easily do around 80 square meters a day. And
that's nice. So you're saying that you did 6 of these wall elements that we're seeing here in the video, 6 of those every day, right?
Yeah.
Not bad at all. And Nick, were you there with the printing as well, or did you come in after the walls were printed and you worked on actually placing them, or did you get the chance?
So obviously we'd met Wafaey much earlier in the year, and so we had it was probably a good 7-8 months, I think, from when we even longer than that, in fact, from when we first met through to when the walls were being printed. So we knew that the day it was going to happen. We knew we were literally the site for this was about a 5-minute drive down the road to the QOROX factory. So we were all down there watching it literally, appear in front of our eyes. And so yeah, this project, and Waf touched on it before, was the first project where QOROX had tried continuous printing one after the other, just with a repeat file. and just it was the first time of seeing the factory and having been down there regularly in the time beforehand to see one-off prints being done, and now like a production line going out a door was just it just seemed like a real game-changing moment, I think, and for both for us as using QOROX and for QOROX themselves is what the potential of this stuff is.
Yeah. And how did you guys from your team being used to traditional construction, how did they look at this? Was it like, oh no, this thing is taking our jobs, or is it just the next step? Or because that's something that we get a lot, like, okay, and now what about all the masonries and the workers? But it still has to be placed, right? So how did those guys look at it?
Yeah, I mean, we've a funny market over here at the moment where people are pretty busy, and employees are quite not burnt out, but the people with everything that's gone on the last few years, people are just trying to wrapping their heads around something different is quite a challenge for them. So our biggest challenge really was to say to the guys, here's a new piece of technology, we're going to use it, and then going, oh no, we don't know about that. But when we actually sat them down and said, look, it's treat it like a giant piece of concrete masonry block, their heads sort of got around it a little bit easier, and literally after I think the first day we had the boys from QOROX helping us install the first panels, and after that they were away. It was simple, real simple.
So it also shows you that with the 1 day of training, you can get a GC contractor to install the panels themselves, because we did not do the installations of the remaining of the panels. You see, these are the first panels being installed, and we think it's a big milestone because this is the first panels for a first commercial 3D printed building in the Southern Hemisphere, and the first one definitely in New Zealand. So, and our guys were there with them for the first delivery, and the first delivery, because of the speed, we in 3 hours. So they took literally a 3-hour training, and then they were able to do the rest by themselves. You don't need to have months and weeks of training and installation. So general contractors can use the same workforce that they have. They just need to have half a day of training, and that's it.
And general contractors who have used precast will pick this up real fast. Like it's probably a simpler process than what they do for normal precast construction.
Yeah, so that was going to be my next curve. How has that learning curve been for the guys actually on the job side? But you just answered that brilliantly. 3 hours of seeing QOROX team doing it together with them, and after that they just picked up and got it straight away, right?
Yeah.
And after that, how fast? Because I believe Wafaey said it in the beginning with some other videos, but you guys placed how many panels in 1 day?
Here the average 17 minutes, 22, and the best was 17 minutes. And this was in the Rain Gardens. We did the 29 panels in 1 day.
That's insane.
So I think total in here, Dan, there was 100. Correct if I'm wrong here, Wafa, was I believe 150 square meters total of walls. It was we had 4 deliveries come up essentially to bring all of the walls up. So just a single truck with I can't recall how many panels on each one. And literally it was about half a day from the truck to go down to the factory, load up, come to site, install, and then drive back to the factory and drop off the frame. We're a half a day for each one of those install time. So we were about 2 days of dealing with the truck in total by the time we finished this job. But it was stop start. It wasn't 2 days on site. It was half that time with it driving to site or coming back. And then there was about another I believe 2 days of prep that we had to do inside the walls just to meet our seismic sort of and rebar requirements within the wall. But the beauty of them was they were literally plonked on site, and once we'd filled them with concrete, you can see the picture of the boom there, filling them up with concrete. The only things we did to those walls after that was paint them.
Right. and that was just for aesthetics, right? It wasn't really necessary because they are quite waterproof already, but you guys painted them for the aesthetics.
So under our stringent New Zealand requirement, they're asking for us to seal them, which we did actually seal these walls, but the texture of it, there was a couple of little learning moments that came from this, where the boys were trying to get a little bit of stuff off the walls, and they used the wire brush on it, and it ended up with a bit of spotting, where it had almost taken off like a milky coat. So we ended up with these couple little patches, which sort of made the look of the wall a little bit blotchy. So in the end, we decided to paint the wall after they'd already been sealed. And the painted wall, which we could have done instead of sealing, and was probably about half the price of sealing it, looks amazing, absolutely incredible.
Yeah, but I've seen some pictures of it. I don't know if we have them in this webinar. Yeah, there we go. So the picture on the right, that's just a very nice looking, nice looking wall, very consistent, so to speak.
Yeah. So there's very consistent mix.
Then I have another pretty important and scary question for me being in sales. Was it faster and was it cheaper? So please tell me that both of those are true, or at least one of them. No, but did you guys actually? Was it faster? Was it cheaper? How did the business case work out for you?
In this scenario here, it wasn't any cheaper, but it wasn't any more expensive. Had we designed it from day one to be a QOROX wall rather than design it as a precast and then replace it with QOROX, with 3D printed wall, I believe it would have come out fractionally cheaper. And then speed wise, in terms of precast, it's probably there would have been a little bit of a time saving there over precast construction, but where the time saving was in particular was this wall on the bottom right, where that also has our insulation within it. So that wall was basically planted on and painted, right? Whereas precast, we would have, because of insulation requirements, we would have had to strap and line it, or it would have been a precast panel with a foam polystyrene inside it, which is then another cost added to it. So these other walls in this building that did have 3D printing, for example, the one on the bottom left, the back side of that is all strapped in line just to meet a council requirement. And the amount of time spent, pinning bits of timber to a wall to cover it in plasterboard, and then plaster that, paint it, ready for the inside. That's where a huge amount of time was spent. So had we not had to do that, it would have been considerabably faster overall.
Yeah, so that's something that we notice quite a lot. If you change your project midway through, or not even during construction, but during designing, then you can do that, but you lose a lot of the benefits of the technology. But if you, as we always say, use a wholesome solution, right, from design and engineering all the way to finishing, then you tend to end up with a bit quicker and cheaper construction overall. Is that a correct assumption?
Yeah, and we've done some modeling for future jobs with where we actually have won these jobs, and we're building them currently out of conventional construction methods, so timber frames and brick claddings, and as a bit of a cost exercise, we have done some comparisons, and the pricing's working out. And to actually build it, the price is working out very, very, very similar for doing our single story stuff, but essentially all of those walls become a concrete house. So your value of what you're getting for your dollar is significantly better. And then the time saving on the build of that project is somewhere around, I think from memory, we're about 150 square meters on these properties, on these houses. We'd be saving around 7 weeks off each one of those builds. So it's shaving a couple of months off a build.
And on a project that would take how long overall? So 7 weeks out of?
Well, historically, that build would have been probably about a 16-week build, 17-week build. But, timeframes in construction in the last 3 years are something that's kind of non-existent anymore. just can't guarantee what you're going to get each day. So there's another to what we're to this sort of technology is the amount of materials that you have to try and organize and gather in becomes very, very limited, and you're down to a limited number of suppliers of who does it, or if you're sourcing that yourself, you're worried about really only getting in a couple of different materials versus trying to piece together 7, 8, 9, 10 different tradesmen and their materials to replicate the same thing.
Yeah, so that again comes back to indeed that fragmented construction market that we have now with hard logistics, supply chain problems. But just on raw projects alone, raw construction time, saving 7 weeks of a 17-week project doesn't really sound that bad altogether. Right.
No, so yeah, another scenario that we've looked at is comparing it from essentially a finished concrete pad, and so how long would it take us from there? Because that time is about the same, and we're looking at if one of these projects being completely 3D printed walls, that we would have those walls printed, ready to deliver. The moment the pad is finished, as soon as it could take the weight of those walls, we'd put them on there. And from that point through to being closed in, roof on, closed in, your joinery, your windows and things in, could be somewhere from 3 to 4 weeks. Whereas, and that means all those walls are lined, finished. Whereas that to get to that stage in conventional methods is, if that's let's say that's 4 weeks, that'd probably be 3 months.
Yeah, so that's great.
Also, one of the other things is that New Zealand it rains a lot. So one of the biggest challenges that we have with timber frame and construction is that if you really have the roof on, all of this timber that's holding the roof is actually getting soaked into the water. So I end up with all of warping and twisting in the timber framing until the roof is on, and then you have to wait until the timber dries. With 3D printed walls, you don't have any of these issues because it will not rain. So you don't have to worry about if it's raining or not raining on the wall element.
And that comes back to the other benefits as well. Like Nick just said, the cost is about the same, but the quality of product that you get out of it is a lot higher. And that is not only for the end project, but also during construction, just a more stable wall, right? And less prone to warping or water damage and stuff like that.
There's been quite a number of weather events, and they happen all around the world, obviously. But literally just up the road from us, in one of New Zealand's biggest cities, has had some good flooding, and likewise further down south on the east coast. And these houses have been flooded up to above the door height, so they're flooding up to 2.1 meters. And a lot of those houses are just going to have a bulldozer go through them and start again. Because they're so water damaged, whereas a construction like this, it could be that the structure of the building is fine, and so it's a case of replacing the internal finishings like your carpets and your drapes and your cabinetry, and then carry on living in it. So you're not having to rebuild again; you're just having to refit out, which obviously saves time, and the building's still good to go.
All right. Any other things that you guys noticed during this project that you're like, I have to tell the world about this, or did we cover it all?
Look, the jaw, as we touched on earlier, it definitely had some learnings that came from the previous couple of jobs, and which made this job very, very fast. But the learning curve on those previous jobs was quite steep. So I think from WAF and my discussions, we haven't broken the back on 3D printing. We're always going to be learning new stuff with it, but it's nice to get to a stage where from the on-site installation, I guess, that we've worked out a way that needs to be done, and the tolerances around how that are sort of allowable for that. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, that's something else, of course. Like we at SIBA, we call ourselves pioneers with this technology because we've been building the machines and experimenting with them for around 10 years now. But Wafaey, of course, is a pioneer in actually using them. And Nick, you are a pioneer in actually being a GC working together with Wafaey. So you guys are pretty much on the forefront of actual production and use cases, and looking at your projects that you have done, and that you are doing now, the increase in complexity and usability goes up really quickly. So that's great to see that you guys are working on so many things. And talking about that curve, that kind of brings us to the next part where I would like to talk about the future. Yep, and we will be talking about that future in just a bit. But like I said, we talked about some difficulties that Wafaey and Nick noticed during not just the iconic daycare, but project before that. We addressed some challenges and how they overcame them. Some of them were a bit bigger, some of them not so much. And we were very interested to know in what you think is the most challenging part of building a 3D concrete printed building. Especially curious about this since a lot of people are, according to our previous poll, contemplating actually buying one, but there must be a reason why you're hesitant. So we're curious about what that reason might be. Let's see, making the business case. Understood. We can help with that, of course. Purchasing a concrete printer. Well, that doesn't have to be hard, but I understand that the financing part of the purchase might be difficult. Depending on the region that you're from, we do have financing options. We have partners for financing and for leasing. So if that's one of the big things, of course, please feel free to reach out and we can maybe find a way to work with our partners to solve that issue for you. Others, namely, and then we have one in the chat. Getting accurate and specific information on material cost. Well, also, I understand that because, of course, this material doesn't grow on every tree around the world, so it has to be made and also transported, and this transportation cost can be quite difficult to calculate beforehand. We do offer local material development programs where we, together with our customer, find a local concrete manufacturer, and we find a way to produce this material locally, partly with local aggregates and partly with our Ciba power bag. So we can get this material quite close to you, but it depends, of course, on where in the world you are located. We have some other ones in the chat. Getting a client that wants to take the risk. Yep, that makes sense. Wafaey just got lucky with Nick, I guess. It might be hard to convince such a client. We currently, at Ciba Construction Florida, are working on a private project in Florida for a client, actually building her home. We will probably have a webinar about that in the near future once that project is finished. Currently, I do know that Jared Gross, some of you might know him, does have a short video up on his YouTube where he is actually at that construction site. So I think Jesse will be finding that link shortly and placing it in the chat so you can check it out after this, where we actually are working for a private client. Let's see. Would be nice to have more leasing options. I understand. We are still expanding that network. We didn't work with leasing. I believe we started working on a lease basis since this year. So we are still expanding our network of leasing partners. So yes, we are working on that. I do understand that the financing part can be difficult sometimes. Design and engineering of a printable building. That doesn't have to be a problem. Like I just said in the chat, we have a full team of architects and structural engineers that can help you with this problem. Within the purchase of a printer, the design and engineering for your first building is included. So our team will take that issue out of your hands for your first project, and we can also teach you how to do that for your second, third, and all following projects. And then the business case, we can help with that as well, as long as we have enough details to actually make that for you.
Well, we have a cost calculation colleague.
Yep. Yep. So we can, of course, also compare your traditional build with the 3D printing option, and we can compare those costs to get you started on such a business case. I believe after this poll, I missed something, Ray, getting up to speed on the tech. and process so as to de-risk before committing to financing and building a team. That makes sense as well. How would we solve that? Well, we do have some trainings and courses on our library. You are also welcome to come visit for a masterclass where we explain everything about the tech, the designing, how the printer works in one day. So you can reach out to us for such a masterclass where you can come visit our facility. We can go through all the steps involved in this new technology. We of course know that there is quite a knowledge gap between traditional construction and this automated construction, and we do our very best, especially Jesse van Dongen, our moderator, who is also our learning and development manager, to put as much knowledge on our library as possible to cover this gap. So there are options to cover that as well. Would it be possible to have access to this comparison studies? We don't publish comparison studies per se, not because we don't dare to do so, but because we work all around the world. So a comparison out of the Caribbean does not make sense at all in New Zealand, and again, does not make sense in the USA, and also doesn't make sense in South Africa. And since we have projects all over the world, I would rather you reach out to me via the contact form, where we can work on your specific case, because it's just a more accurate representation of such a comparison, if that makes sense. So we don't publish them, but you can definitely get in touch with me to look at your specific case. Also, I believe we do have a webinar. I don't know which number it is from the top of my head. That is about these cost calculations. So watching that webinar might also be helpful to get started on making such a cost comparison yourself and maybe start making your business case. I'm going to ask Jesse to see if he can put the link or at least the number of the webinar in the chat as well, so you can go look that up as well. Like I said, after this, because we also have a Q&A after this, so feel free to ask more questions in the chat that I can look at after this last segment. We will look at the future and the impact according to Wafaey from QOROX and of course Nick from Iconic. So, where do you guys see yourself going in the future? What will be the impact of the technology in the future? I don't know if you guys have an idea about that, but that's a nice bridge to that subject.
So we've got, I'll jump in here. So we've got a couple of projects lined up for Iconic that we are now trying to really, excuse the pun, we're trying to cement ourselves into using 3D printing for everything that we do. You know, we're still traditional builders at the end of the day, but our sort of own developments that we do and trying to expose people to 3D printing is definitely one of the things that we are is become our absolute motto on how we try and operate every day. It's, as far as we're aware, we're probably the only company like that at the moment in New Zealand who are really pushing that avenue. And at this stage, we you know, we've got a really good streamline access to it. So working very closely with WAF, as we said, we're for this project 5 minutes down the road from each other the whole time. So it's been really good comms the whole way through. Yeah, and then obviously QOROX, as you can see in the bottom side here, has outgrown its little facility. One of the learnings was you need, when you're pumping out a lot of walls, you need a lot of outdoor space to be able to hold enough of them to be able to put them on a truck so that they don't clog your print area. And that way, when you are printing, you can just keep going the whole way through non-stop.
That's great. So looking back at a couple of projects that you guys done, you're not sick of the technology yet. You're actually excited to continue using it in the future as well, which is something that's great to hear, because a lot of something that I hear a lot is like, yeah, worldwide there are a lot of projects being printed, but you don't often see the same company using it again and again and again in a short period. But you guys are just keep using it in the future as well, and you already have projects in the pipeline to actually use it on again, right?
Yeah, and I think to speak to that a little bit, you know, you're dealing with firsts a lot, right? So there's people aren't always going to have the best experience being number one of something. So they are the pioneers of it. Wafa's the pioneer of bringing it into sort of the Pacific area, and you guys are pioneering the sort of the European market side of it. So not every job is going to go perfectly, but within a very short space of time, jobs are going better and faster, and the progression is really, really quick. So if you're willing to ride out some of those early battles, the advantage at the other end of it is going to be astronomical. It's going to be very, very good.
Yeah, so it's not a magic machine that spits out magic dust that will make your whole business case better immediately. But if you are willing to stick it out and learn to use it, then the benefits are definitely there in the long run, is what you're saying, right?
Yeah, and the learning is steep and fast, and therefore the progression is also steep and fast.
Yeah, because comparing your earlier projects to your last one, that's a world of difference, right? And not that much in sake of time between them, but just quality between them.
Or even just the thought during that job of should we have a go at continuous printing today? Like in going, should we have a crack at how many panels can we do before we can't do any more? And we reached a moment where it couldn't happen any further. But prior to that, there was never even that thought process about maybe we could do one after the other. How do we make that happen? And then you do it and you go, holy hell! You stand back after 4 hours and there's all these walls standing in front of you, and it's just yeah.
Our record of printing, we printed 13 panels of the rain garden in one day. So we don't have enough space for them. So we were printing some of the panels and printing them in the morning and lifting them in the afternoon because we didn't have enough space.
For the people that don't know this, normally we advise you to let the ball sit for around a day-ish before actually lifting it. You can move it around if you support it from the bottom, but if you're trying to lift it up, then we usually advise you to leave them for a day, but you actually did it within, let's say, the morning till the afternoon, 8 to 10 hours, you started lifting them, correct?
6.
That's insane. So yeah, we've shortly talked about this already, but I would love to hear your opinion about where do you see the technology evolving in the next 5 or 10 years, for example.
I will answer this one first. I think what's going to happen will be a lot more automation involved in it, whether it's feeding systems to the mortar crops, and also the control of the mix itself, which will also end up having less people involved in the print, which ultimately helps with resolving the continuous labor shortage that we have. And there will be a variety of materials that you'll be using them for different purposes. You will have a super fast setting material that you use for small pieces. You will have longer setting material for gantry systems. You will have stuff in between. You will have a variety of two component systems and one component system. There'll be a lot more options available that will be more tailored to what type of market you are aiming for.
Yeah, that makes sense. Of course, there's a lot of things that the robot can do, but it all depends on the material that comes out of it, how you can actually use that functionality. And Nick, for you as a GC, what do you see changing in the next 5 to 10 years in working with this technology?
Yeah, I think it's going to be from the contractor putting it together. It'll be a case of how the design element of this sort of technology changes. So, things like curves are now a very simple thing, but now we go from curves into multiple curves or squiggly line or something like that if you're doing formwork or you're doing whatever you're attaching to that has to adapt to it as well. So even things like cabinetry or joinery that you're not dealing with straight lines if you don't want to, and so that will have its challenges that come about it, but also the end product of that is very unique in its own respect.
Yeah, so the design and construction elements surrounding the technology will be changing with the technology as well. Not just the technology, but the entire process around it has to change as well to make it even more optimal. All right,
Yeah,
that
and
makes sense.
even architects having and designers having to get their heads around, well, how does this thing actually work, and how can we then take that into what we want to achieve? Even simple things like the sort of software and stuff they use for designing, how that integrates in a simple way with doing patterns and things, rather than having it to almost come from two places. You know, that'll get more streamlined. Things will get faster. The thought of being able to use it will become simpler.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's why we have our moderator, Jess van Dongen, our learning and development manager, working on courses to get this knowledge gap, because that's what it is, right? How do we use it? What kind of construction technology? It's a knowledge gap, pretty much.
Yeah.
And we have to cover that knowledge gap as good as we can. So we'll be working on that definitely. Now we talked a little bit about what other industries. I don't have to pick your brain about that again. We've seen the traffic outlets, construction, the blocks that go under the water with the seashells. So there's a lot of implementations that we have already talked about. And then a quick question for you guys to finish it up before I ask you for your advice for people that are looking to use this technology. What do you think will be the biggest impact of 3D concrete printing in the construction industry as a whole? Is it just less labor, less time, different materials? What do you think is going to be the biggest change to the entire industry?
We're dealing effectively with the Model Ts of the robots and printing systems. So the biggest impact we will have is that there'll be a lot more autonomous, and this will fill up the gap that you have. So the little resources that you have, or the few people, construction industry will be able to produce a lot more and a lot more effectively and efficiently. So overall, you'll be able to build faster and ultimately cheaper than how we build right now. And most likely with a lot more sustainable materials than we're traditionally using. So it's reduced the carbon footprint of what we're doing. Everything is heading in that direction, and with the continuous development of it, we will definitely be there.
That makes sense. That's kind of what we are expecting here at CIVA as well, right? It's about the human resources and material resources. Pretty much every resource that you have to put in construction will change quite a bit using this technology. And then to close off, guys, I would like to ask you your advice, because we have a lot of people watching this webinar, most of them actually that don't yet have a printer but might be interested in one. So what kind of advice could you give if people are interested in actually starting their 3D printing business or career?
Just get one, get two, get three.
Nick, I love you. You can come on the show way more often.
In construction, you're dealing with typically a group of society who are not known to be tech savvy, and so you're bringing on this technology like robotics and things into an industry that traditionally hasn't had it. So it's probably where Waf's saying is you need that mix to be able to have the guys who can understand a very raw basics about robotics and loading files to be able to print files, which is as we've seen from our experience of dealing with QOROX is a relatively simple process, but it's having someone who is willing to take that on, I guess, and then also someone else with the knowledge of how that's going to be applied into a construction site and worked around. So a good project manager, or it will require a team of quite a diverse range of skills, I think, but not a big team. It doesn't need a lot of people to make it happen.
Yeah. So that pretty much comes back to finding the right provider of the technology that has the right knowledge to help you make such a team, and then also finding people around you that are willing to work with that technology. So it's about finding the local partners that you want to work with, as well as the correct tech provider that can support you in getting this off the ground, right?
Yeah, and I don't know, like the rest of the world's obviously a little bit different everywhere you go, right? So as Waf also touched on, the right bit of kit for what you're doing. If you're We don't think that particular setups are good for where we are, because we just we're restricted by a building code that means we can't go above a certain size anyway. So there's no point in having the biggest thing for us here, whereas in another country that's going to be a really easy thing to do. In another country, something that's more mobile and being able to go onto site and do its thing is going to be the right answer. So it's do your homework on what you're going to get away with, and what each one of those units is capable of.
Yeah, makes sense. So that all points to us pretty much. I mean, we have 5 different printers and 10 years of experience. So if you want to buy one from us, is what you're saying,
Yeah,
right?
true.
No, but yeah, no, I agree with you.
Buy one of each.
Yeah, one of each. Yeah. All right, this has been great, guys. I want to thank you so much for being here. Of course, I don't know if we have Nick's contact and socials here, but we can definitely put those after this interview so that they can look you guys up. Wafaey, thank you as always, and Nick, it was very nice meeting you, and I hope to speak to you both again in the future. If there's anything you guys want to close off with, then now's your time, and if not, thank you, and see you next time.
Thanks, Dan. Appreciate it.
No worries, guys. Thank you. So that was Wafaey and Nick talking about their vision on the future for this technology. As we just said in the pre-recorded part, we did actually put Nick's contact information on there as well. So if you want to check out his website or say hello to him, you can send an email to that. And same goes, of course, for Wafaey. If you want to check out his website or inquire about what he's going to be doing in the future, you can reach out to him as well. Like I just said, they are not here with us at this moment because they're probably in their bed sleeping. It's 3 o'clock, or almost 3:20 in the morning in New Zealand, but I will try to answer as many questions as I can. That being said, you can also email your questions that are directed to them, of course, to that email address as well.
We have a good question of Keith in the chat.
All right, let's get into it. Please, guys, put your questions in the chat and we will go through them. Keith asks, just curious, what's your current presence in the US? How can we have a chat on offline? Well, this is interesting. So, like I said earlier in the webinar, we are currently working on a project in Panama City Beach in Florida. I cannot say exactly where because then it would get too crowded on the build side and we don't want any liability there. However, if you are interested in meeting us face to face and seeing that construction in progress live, please reach out to me via the contact form on the website. You have a drop-down menu with different options where you want to reach out to. If you select, I want to buy a printer, I won't hold you to it immediately, but if you select that option, then your email will go to me and we can see if we can work something out in regards of a visit to our Florida site. Furthermore, we do have a subsidiary of our company in Tallahassee, which is still being set up. So it's nothing fancy. It's not like there's a showroom there, but we do construction ourselves out of that facility in the Florida region, northern Florida region. So if you are interested, reach out to me via the contact form on our website that Jesse just put in the chat as well. And then we can see if there's something that we can arrange in regards to a visit. I see Barbara asking if we can put our email in there as well. We can, but I would prefer that you go through the contact form on the website. Then everything comes in the logical place for me. If not possible, it is the sales email, but I would really like using the contact form. Makes it a lot easier for me to keep track of everything that comes in. That way I won't miss your email. And in Europe, well, if you're in Europe, you're quite close to us. Of course, we're based in the Netherlands. And in that case, please also reach out and we can see if we can as I said earlier, arrange a masterclass or a visit or a short training course here on site. So there's a lot of options there as well. So same as in the US, feel free to reach out and we can see if there's a possibility to plan a visit. All right, wonderful. I answered all Keith's questions. Anyone else? Any questions for me as of right now? Oh yeah, as you can see on your screen right now, this is our academy. That's where our courses are located. So some of them are on site, some of them are digital. Some are free, some are paid services. Of course, if you buy a printer, you will get full access to this. But before that time, it is paid information, or at least a couple of them. Because Jesse made these and he also has to get paid, right? So, so I don't see any other questions at this point. With that, I would like to thank you all immensely again for being here. I hope this was interesting for you to look at. It's of course a bit of a different format than our usual webinars, a bit more about our partner, a bit less about us. After this webinar, you will get a short evaluation form that we would love if you could fill that out. Gives us some feedback on how we did and what we can change in the future. Apart from Wafaey's audio, of course, that will probably not happen again in the future. So that's pretty much it for our next webinar. Oh yeah, we're going to be looking not at Wafaey's project, but at a couple of projects that we did ourselves or with a partner, or our partners did, but we designed a lot of. And we'll dive in a bit more to the technical aspects. For example, what are the structural elements? How did we seal the gaps between walls? How did we do the foundation? Questions like that, more technical and design details will be talked about in our next webinar with a couple of our architects and structural engineers. So if you're interested in the technical details, the 3rd of May is the date. So we would all love to see you there. That's it from my side. Thank you guys, and I hope to see you in the next one. Have a good day.